Did James Franklin really take a jab at the Penn State fan base?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We should add some context to it. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Adam Sheetz is back, former Penn State men's basketball insider, also covered football, baseball, and other sports during his time at Penn State. He is a free agent broadcaster for anybody out there that is hiring. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Adam, I was definitely taken back by the snippet of the quote. Okay, let's run through it again here. We are one of the few programs in the country you can win 10 or 11 games and people are unhappy. There's a before and after to that, because out of context, that sounds like a direct shot at the fan base. But this is the full quote. There are guys that embrace that we're at a place like Penn State and where we've been able to consistently, for the most part, win 10 or 11 games. And that's not the expectation of Penn State. They choose Penn State just like I chose Penn State to compete for championships, and we embrace that. Here's this other part of the quote. We are one of the few programs in the country where you can win 10 or 11 games and people are unhappy, so we embrace that. So he's talking about the challenge. He's talking about the challenge of it. So yeah, it's a little more coach speak, but the quote just isn't as juicy and controversial as I guess anybody else would have wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, James has never been a guy that's going to go out there and give you all these quotes at media day like some other coaches around the country. He usually does it just like a normal press conference. He's really, a lot of coach speak, long answers, makes you really read through everything to get his full point. Does a great job just talking about what he wants to talk about, and any question that he really doesn't, he'll deflect it into a way where he's able to talk about things that he wants to express. I think with this one, it's something that, he's absolutely on the head, hit the nail on the head with it. I mean, that Penn State is a program where you now 10 or 11 games, that's not what the fans are looking for anymore. They want more, they expect more, and credit to James Franklin. It's a credit to his coaching staff and his program that they've built it up now from when he inherited it in 2014 to now, that this is the expectation going into every season, that Penn State, you got to win more. You have an opportunity with the expanded college football playoff, a lot of different things, a different Big Ten, just picked to finish third in the conference by the media. A lot of things going Penn State's way, and that expectation has changed. So it's more of a compliment to James Franklin and everything he's been able to do with this program. But as you said, some fans might be a little upset with it. But if you really read into it, it's kind of like, well, he's saying that's the expectation, and all fans should agree with him. That should be the expectation for this program.
Yeah, that's most certainly the case here. He's not trying to take a jab at the fan base. He owns that this is the standard, and it's not good enough. We're not living up to it. So that's when you read between the lines. That's exactly what Coach Franklin is saying here, and that's the only way you're going to shut anybody up. The critics, the haters, the reporters, the fans that just don't like James Franklin. That's how you do it. You get to the playoff, you win a playoff game. So how do you get Penn State fans and the critics to relax a little bit, to say that James Franklin is doing a good enough job? Because again, under the circumstances, with what James Franklin inherited and how many New Year's Six bowl games that you have won, you have a conference championship victory. Other than Ohio State and Michigan, I can't complain about the resume over the past decade here. Yes, would I obviously like Penn State to have made a top four? Of course, the college football playoff expanding into 12, so it's not as tough to get into. So yes, you have to win that first round match. That's how you do it. You don't even need to win a championship. You don't even need to make the championship. I think if you can get a home round game, you can get a first round game where you win at home in that nighttime winter whiteout and then advance, then you just kind of relax a little bit. Yes, you want them to win. I'm not trying to make excuses, but this is how you can say, okay, James Franklin at least is helping Penn State take a step further than where they've been at that 10-2 mark.
Yeah, and I think, for some fans and the fan base, it's going to be, he's got to win a national championship or it's not enough. But that's not realistic for really any coach in the country at this point to say, well, if they don't win a national championship, it's a huge disappointment. Penn State, I think you hit it. I think they got to win big games. I think that's right now the knock on him. It used to be maybe, it's 10-2. He's got to find a way to get over the hump, whether that's beating Ohio State, whether that's going and beating USC this year on the road, or, Washington at home in the whiteout game, more than, of course, coming down to it, you get in a playoff game this year, winning that game, not just going to the playoff and then losing to a team that's very comparable to you. You got to then win that game. And I think that's going to be what kind of maybe silences the critics a lot. If he's able to go to the playoff, win a game, then maybe, you get to that second round in that top 8 and you play a team, that's one of the top 3 in the country and you play them close, but you just don't find a way to win it in one of the New Year's 6 bowl games. That could happen, but I don't think critics would come after James Franklin's head unless, something crazy happens in that game that would be a detriment to him and maybe a mistake he made. But I think you hit it there. I think it's got to find a way just to win a big game and win a playoff game, get in the playoff first. I think that's the big thing, and show that you're moving Penn State forward, and it's not going to be the same thing where you're just missing out on the playoff.
So that quote, completely taken out of context. Penn State has bigger, loftier goals, as they should. They don't want to be 10-2. Wanting to be and actually getting to where you want to be are two different things. And realistically, they're probably going to be 10-2 again this year, but I think that's an important point, Adam. There are more big games in this schedule, and it's going to be that way moving forward. It is no longer Ohio State and Michigan or Ohio State and some other ranked Big Ten team, and you have to win at least one of them. They've been losing because, again, it's not just Ohio State and Michigan. You lost to a ranked Minnesota team when you were vying for a college football playoff spot in 2019. You lost to Michigan State in that 2017 season. So I can accept that losing to a top 5 Ohio State team, losing to a national championship contending Michigan team, that is understandable. But when it's Minnesota or Michigan State, when you're right there and that's the only other hurdle that you have to jump over and you miss those, that's kind of where I draw the line. It's not even just about Ohio State and Michigan. Again, as great as those wins would be in recent years, it's those other ones where Penn State was the favorite. Penn State was expected to beat those opponents and they fell short in those games.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. I think you look at those games, 2018 Michigan State game, after they lost to Ohio State, bye week came back. Ohio State had just lost to Purdue. Everything's kind of like, Penn State might find their way in the playoff the way Ohio State did in 2017, losing a game, but then coming all the way back and finding their way in it in 2016, my pardon, when Ohio State was able to get in. I mean, just a lot of those games where it's like when the expectations got really high and everyone kind of thought Penn State's a team, better watch out here for the playoff. That's when those losses came, and that's why fans, are so hurt by it and they remember it the most. This past year, of course, the Michigan game in November, high expectation. You win that game, might find your way in the Big Ten championship, probably finding your way in the playoff. Unable to do that. You mentioned the Minnesota game. They're ranked number 4. That was right after the first college football playoff rankings came out. They were the 4th ranked team in the country. They're in the playoff if the season ended that day, and then they go to Minnesota and lose a tough game on the road against a good Minnesota team. They were undefeated at that time, but a game that Penn State should have won, and they were unable to do so. So I think that's why everyone kind of looks at it like, you're not going to play Ohio State and Michigan the same year, but Washington's a big game. Wisconsin on the road's a sneaky big game for you. USC, first time going out there on the road in a conference game's going to be a huge game for you. West Virginia week 1's obviously the one James Frank's going to say the most important one, going 1-0 every week. It's all those games that Penn State's going to look at and say, there's a lot of big games now. Is James Franklin and this program going to take that step, start winning these games, coming out on the right side of them, and that's going to be what bolsters a team that could eventually make a playoff and make a run at potentially a national championship.
There's about at least 5 or 6 of these types of big games. Yes, Ohio State is going to be the biggest one because they are a national championship contender. But as you mentioned, Washington in the whiteout game, going on the road to USC, going on the road to Camp Randall and Wisconsin. And the schedule just doesn't let up. Sure, everyone's going to say that Minnesota and Purdue and Maryland at the end of the season are gimmies, but who knows that any of those teams could be ahead of expectations and at least give teams in the conference fits down the stretch of the campaign. So we'll see. It's not easy, but there could be even more big games than just past the 3, 4, or 5 that we're throwing out there right now. That's how competitive this new Big Ten conference looks. Now, James did give some updates as far as injured players and a special game plan for a special player. Abdul Carter is going to have a game plan week by week. We're going to discuss that and how that affects the defense coming up next. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. It's summertime, and I love going to Major League Baseball games, and I use the Gametime app to go to pro baseball games, and you should too, because Gametime is the authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. So that means you get tickets faster and easier. And get this, prices on the Gametime app actually go down as it gets closer to first pitch. You get last minute deals. You can save up to 60% on last minute tickets for not only Major League Baseball, but all of sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Also exclusively in the app, you get flash deals and zone deals. So more discounts on top of those discounts. You get all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and probably the best feature, my favorite feature, especially if you haven't been to a specific venue before, is the panoramic views of the seats. So you're not second guessing yourself. You're not wondering what that point of view is going to be like. You can see that within the app before you get to the stadium, to the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I actually really like the idea of Abdul Carter having a week by week game plan where he's not just a defensive end. This is what Penn State's implying, that he's either going to be the defensive end or move back to linebacker, because every game's going to be different. Penn State's going to run a hybrid type of defense at the end of the day. It's probably going to be mostly a 4-2-5 base just because they have so many good defensive backs, particularly safety. You have too many safeties to bench them and just say, well, we'll play Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley. Well, we'll play KJ Winston and Jalen Reed. No, you have to play all three because they're that good. You can't just leave them off the field. So to get your best 11 defenders on the field, and what they've had with some of the injury news, Keon Wiley being out. And we'll talk more about the injured players in the upcoming segment. But this is why Abdul Carter has a week-by-week game plan here. Zariah Fisher is banged up, right? So wherever there's depth concerns, that's how versatile Abdul Carter is, that he can be your defensive end one week and then move back to linebacker to help if it's a 4-3 defense that's needed given your opponent. Because against USC, you're probably going to run a 4-2-5, but versus an Illinois or a Minnesota, you're going to probably want to run a 4-3.
Yeah, I think, it's all on matchups. And I think Abdul Carter, James mentioned that he had been a 250-pound linebacker. He's kind of one of those freak athletes that's kind of a heavier set linebacker that can move up, play back, and do a lot of different things because of how athletic he is. And the one thing to look at is, I'm sure James Franklin's looking at it right now, the way Micah Parsons was used his rookie year in Dallas, where they'd use him as an edge rusher in certain situations when they play the pass, then moving him back to stop the run when that was taken as well. I mean, that's a guy James obviously knows very well, a guy that played at Penn State and has had tremendous success at the NFL, moving back and forth between linebacker and edge rusher. I think that's how they're going to look at it when they play a team, as you mentioned, like an Illinois, like a Wisconsin, West Virginia week 1 we had talked about. They're going to want to run the ball a lot, moving him back in certain situations, allowing him to be more of a run stopper instead of a true pass rusher is going to be very interesting to see. And I really like it because it allows Penn State to be as strong as they can be every single week, depending on the matchup, which I think makes other offensive coordinators very scared because you never know what exact defense you're going to get from Penn State week in and week out.
I'm glad you brought up the perspective of the opposing offense, because that makes it that much more troublesome to game plan for. Okay, Abdul Carter is a pass rusher. All right, maybe we'll use the running back to chip. Oh, wait. He's moving back to the off-ball linebacker. We thought that Penn State was going to run the 4-2-5, and we only had to worry about a combination of Kobe King and Tony Rojas or Dom DeLuca. Two of those three linebackers, Tyler Elsdon as well, right? Other guys that will cycle in, but primarily, and now Abdul Carter is still dropping back into coverage. We've seen him as a coverage linebacker. Adam, LeVar Arrington and Micah Parsons are definitely the guys that you think of first when you talk about number 11 and the historical aspect of Penn State. But I am truly, depending on what kind of season Abdul Carter has here, with this positionless, He's going to be on the line of scrimmage. He's going to be playing linebacker where it's a week by week basis. He might be raising the bar here for what it means to wear number 11 and to do it 3 consecutive years. I know COVID kind of played into that because Micah Parsons was set to have a special junior season, opted out because of the shortened campaign to focus on the NFL draft. I get that. But Abdul Carter, really, at the end of the day, if he has the potential to possibly be the best number 11 in Penn State history, better than LeVar Arrington and better than what Micah Parsons did in a shorter span of time.
Yeah, he definitely has the potential because the one thing you look at, Micah Parsons was not used a lot as a pass rusher because of the necessity at linebacker and the amount of defensive ends they had. LeVar Arrington, he'd blitz, obviously, because how freak of an athlete he was, but he had to drop back in certain situations, played in a different era where it was run first, so he had to really focus on the run before getting to the quarterback, a lot of different things. But with Abdul Carter, what Tom Allen could potentially do with him, looking at, how versatile he can be, move him up, move him back, do a bunch of different things, allows him to be very creative. And if you put him in the right positions every single play, depending on who you're playing, it could be every week you see Abdul Carter do crazy things defensively, whether that be as an edge rusher or maybe getting 11, 12 tackles trying to stop the run. It's going to be so freakish to look at his stat line at the end of the year and potentially see a guy that, is a defensive end and a linebacker, might lead the team in tackles, also lead the team in sacks and do a bunch of different things as well. So it's really fun to watch that he could have a scary, scary year. I'm sure every coach in the conference is looking at it right now like number 11 is going to be an issue even more than maybe we expected going into this year.
And I don't have a preference as far as where he plays week to week. It just, what is the best matchup? Play him there. And that's the thing. That's how good Abdul Carter is and can even continue to get better. The fact that we can sit here confidently and say, if Abdul Carter's at linebacker or he's at defensive end, it doesn't matter. He's going to just disrupt whatever offensive game plan that you have. And I feel, yes, it's a week by week basis, but it's also probably a game situation basis too. It's not like Penn State's going to go into week 1 and say against West Virginia, we need him at linebacker because of XYZ, or we need him at defensive end and we're not going to move him. You can change. That's just how good Abdul Carter is. He's a defensive end for week 1 and now he's a linebacker for week 2. It's probably going to change drive by drive, honestly. You have that flexibility, and that's how talented Abdul Carter is. And you said it, the stat line could be video game-like.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you hit it with the drive-by-drive. Start of a game, a team wants to run the ball. You put him at linebacker to stop the run. Maybe Penn State gets a lead a little bit. The other team's going to start throwing it. Boom, you put him back at edge rusher to go get the quarterback because that's what the other team's going to do. They're going to be able to read the other team and then adjust quickly and allow him to move around. He's definitely good enough to do it. I'm sure he's been working a lot at edge rusher all camps ever since he moved over up to that position. And obviously playing 2 years of linebacker and how great he was as a linebacker, it's going to be natural for him to move back and still do all the things that he was doing in his first 2 seasons at Penn State. So as you said, I mean, it could be video game like numbers. I mean, you could play with him at college football 25 and try to put up numbers, and he could exceed that this year with how great he can be.
Abdul Carter's essentially been playing a stand-up defensive end as it is at that off-ball linebacker position. It demands so much, but he's been rushing the quarterback. He's been dropping back into coverage. He's been able to be the quarterback spy as well. He does it all, so you don't have to box him in. Wherever you need him, he can play. So if that's a defensive end majority of the time, if that's a linebacker, Penn State is benefiting a lot from the presence of Abdul Carter and what is going to be his final season as a Nittany Lion. Now, good news for Penn State. They fully expect Keon Wiley and Zariah Fisher to return. What about a quarterback that could bolster the depth chart? We'll tell you the impact of that news coming up next. So good news for Penn State as far as the injury front goes. Zariah Fisher, Keon Wiley, while they don't exactly have a timetable, are expected to return, and that's a big deal for Penn State. The more the merrier, but also because these guys are quality players. They're not just guys on the depth chart, names that you can find in college football 25 in the video game. These are guys that that were supposed to be significant contributors. Keon Wiley, a guy that allowed Abdul Carter to move to defensive end. That Penn State was even able to consider that move to begin with is because you had Keon Wiley as that backup off-ball linebacker, had showed some progress through his first couple of seasons, and now was going to start to turn the corner. So that stable of Dom DeLuca, Tyler Elsdon, Tony Rojas, Kobe King, Keon Wiley, you had, even though I think linebacker is one of the, I don't want to say weaker, but not as strong position groups on this Penn State roster. Keon Wiley coming back, if that's by week 4, week 6, better late than never at this point. And the same thing with Zuriah Fisher. Zuriah Fisher already battled an injury through his career, and to come back at defensive end, you're loaded at defensive end, whether Abdul Carter's there or not. Even if Abdul Carter didn't make the position change, deny Dennis Sutton, Zuriah Fisher, Amin Vanover, you get Smith Vilbert back, the emergence of Jameel Lyons. I just keep rattling off names, and Penn State is set at defensive end. So now that's why you can have this flexibility with Abdul Carter. So that is great news for Penn State's depth chart and its overall talent on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it was so important to get those two back. I think you look at this defense, they're a team that having as much depth as possible is going to be huge, especially in this new look Big Ten, maybe some more spread offenses, faster pace, more deep balls. You're going to need a lot of depth to sub in and out, and Penn State's hopefully going to be able to do that, and Keon Wiley and Zuriah Fisher are going to be two huge names to help that, and it's great to see that they're on the track to be coming back and being healthy this season. It's great, as you mentioned, and it allows Abdul Carter, as everything we mentioned is because Keon Wiley is going to be coming back as a linebacker to add depth at the linebacker position. Zuriah Fisher is going to make that defensive end room even stronger coming back and adding that depth that you can put him in, even if a guy's down, and move Abdul Carter back as you need, and depending on matchups. So it's just going to be so fun to watch, and getting Tom Allen a fully healthy defense and giving him all the cards to play with is so important. And it's good to see two guys that, it was really hard when you heard them that they were going down. It's kind of like, Penn State, they're going to need them. They're really important to this team, especially, Keon Wiley, a veteran back there, especially we mentioned a lot of young guys. He hasn't played a lot, but he's been in the locker room a lot, been around the program. It's huge to have him back, and I think this is big for Penn State's defense.
No disrespect to Zuriah Fisher, and again, I commend him and applaud him for the journey that he's had through his college football career. Again, the leg injury that ended his season not too long ago, and worked his way back and worked his tail off in the rehab room to get back on the field sooner rather than later. And it's just you just kind of deal with that. That's a football life there, and it's different for everybody. But I am more excited about the potential of Keon Wiley. And again, given that the linebacker room has more question marks surrounding it, Zuriah Fisher, that's great, and it bolsters the defensive end room in that pass rush, and he is more of a pass rusher than a run defender there. So this is good. But Keon Wiley, again, when you have, okay, what can Tony Rojas do? Yes, he has all the potential in the world, but what will he be able to do as more of a full-time linebacker? Dominic DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon had some question marks last season. Yes, I know Dom DeLuca is a special teams captain, and he's a guy that everyone looks up to. The PFF grades are there, but when you watch the tape, it's just not perfect between the two of them. So you lose a Curtis Jacobs. You might have Abdul Carter play a little more defensive end week to week, right? So what does that mean for those guys when Kobe King is really your only anchor there at linebacker? Once Keon Wiley gets back into the swing of things and finds some rhythm after rehabbing fully from any potential injury there, I really do think he has the potential to play alongside and have an equal amount of snaps next to Tony Rojas or Kobe King or any of them. It's just, again, you can cycle through and you feel confident about whichever pair of linebackers is on the football field.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. I think you mentioned Zuriah Fisher's a great player, but Keon Wiley by need and having him back was so important, and I think that's what makes it more exciting to see him getting healthy and getting back because of all the things he can do. Penn State, their linebacker, but it felt weird this year. There wasn't that depth. You didn't have a lot of guys you really trusted in that room. Keon Wiley's a guy that coaching staff trusts. He showed it last year when he got on the field. He had some good sightings when he got in limited action and was expected to take that next step this year. Injuries kind of slowed down the path for him. Being able to get back and getting on the field is going to be so important. It really opens up that defensive playbook.
Jackson Smolik is the last player that's in that injured category. Again, no timeline. We don't know the severity of any of these injuries other than the fact that, hey, it is expected to see Wiley and Fisher return to the field sooner rather than later. Smolik, the jury's still kind of out there, and you don't need to rush him back. And that is because Ethan Grunkmeyer enrolled early, and look, if Penn State has Ethan Grunkmeyer or Jackson Smolik in the game for an extended period of time, that is bad. Your season's gone bad. You got to scrap it and throw it away because something went wrong if Drew Aller and Bo Pribula are not playing quarterback for you this season, and you have to get to Ethan Grunkmeyer. That's no disrespect to them, but because of Ethan Grunkmeyer's availability and him enrolling early, that allows you some extra insurance and some confidence that, okay, we can allow Jackson Smolik to be on his own timeline and not rush him back in case it does get dire, and we need as many quarterbacks as we can in case something really does go off the rail. And knock on wood, this is a wooden desk, but Drew Aller and Bo Pribula, they have the reassurance behind them with an Ethan Grunkmeyer who can come in and be a serviceable game manager if needed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned with the quarterback situation, you hope you don't have to see Jackson Smolik or Ethan Grunkmeyer. Nothing against them, but you're talking about two guys in Drew Aller and Bo Pribula that we've seen the coaching staff trust and expect to be their top two guys at quarterback. So when you talk about that third or fourth string, the big thing is getting them reps in practice, getting the development there and continuing that and allowing, with Grunkmeyer coming in early, kind of getting those reps in, doing a lot of things that if, you need to go to a third string quarterback, he's a guy I'm sure the coaching staff has more trust now than they would have if he would have just been enrolling in August and trying to get him ready to go. So I think it's huge, allows Jackson Smolik to kind of relax, stay on his rehab plan, and then when he's back healthy, get back into the swing of things and do things at his own pace and not be like, oh, maybe, Drew's a little banged up or Bo's a little banged up. We kind of need, that third string guy to be ready just in case it's not rushing Jackson Smolik back. It's like, Ethan Grunkmeyer can do it if he needs to, and just Jackson, stay on your path and don't try to rush back or try to hurt yourself by trying to get back early. So I think that's the big thing and allows Penn State to have more options in that quarterback room.
And that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, he is Adam Sheetz. You can check out his work. His socials will be linked down in the description. Adam, thanks so much for helping me react to Big Ten Media Days and mostly good news for Penn State ahead of training camp here, which starts in just about a week here. So exciting times for Penn State football as the season is ever so close.
Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
And as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the conversation. I want to know what you had to think about what James Franklin said at Big Ten Media Days. Also, the news around Abdul Carter and some of the injury updates. Let me know down in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a like on the episode, share it with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.